Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadhyasya yato anvayaditaratascha artheshu abhigyaswarat Tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yat surayah Tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatratra sargom rasha Dhamna svena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam shukamukadamrita drava sanyutam Pibata Bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. We now enter the 20th chapter of the 9th Skandha of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we saw the story of the king Yayati and how he renounced his kingdom finally and installing his son Puru as the king and Yadu and the other sons as the governors. He left. So now Shuka Brahmam continues with the dynasty of Puru and then Yadu, because Puru's dynasty is where the Pandavas all the way up to Parikshit appear, and Yadu's dynasty is where Krishna appears. It's called the Yadavas, that's why. So first Shuka Brahma Rishi continues with the Puru's dynasty. He tells Parikshit, I shall tell you the line of Puru because this is where you were born. He says, Puror Vamsham Pravakshyami Yatra Jatosi Bharata. So he is addressed as Bharata. Arjuna is also addressed as Bharata in Bhagavad Gita. Why they are all addressed as Bharata will come now, because they are all descendants of Bharata. And who is this Bharata? We shall see soon. He comes in the lineage of Puru. So first Shuka Brahma Rishi says Puru and his lineage continued, and the son of Puru was Janamejaya, and then from him Prachinvan, Pravira, so on it goes on. He gives the list of the various sons in the lineage, and then it comes to a king called Rantibhara, and this Rantibhara had 3 sons, and through that lineage there was one called Medhatiti, and it is surprisingly said that all his sons became Brahmanas. So again here we see another instance of how this is the clan of Kshatriyas, that is the warrior class, the dynasty of the Puru lineage coming from the Chandra Vamsham, starting from Pururava. And yet here Shuka Brahma Rishi says, from Medhatiti, Brahmanas came forth, many Brahmanas came forth from his progeny. So again we see how birth is not determining one's varna, but there are many examples of how due to inclinations and due to qualities and due to activities, people were able to become Brahmanas, and similarly people born to Brahmanas became Kshatriyas and so on. So here another example is given that in the lineage of Puru, the son of Medhatiti, and from him originated many Brahmanas. Meanwhile, there was another son called Raibhya, and he had a son called Dushyanta. So we shall now see the story of Dushyanta, because it's a very famous story which comes in many places. Mahabharata also lists the story, and here we have the story of Dushyanta. So Dushyanta is the king who has come in the lineage of Puru, and it is said that once Dushyanta went to the forest for hunting, and when he went for hunting, he came upon the hermitage of a sage called Khandva. And there in that hermitage of Khandva, he saw a beautiful woman who was so ravishing. It is said that she had such enchanting beauty, she was so effulgent, and instantly as soon as he saw her, he fell in love with her. So he approached her, and very politely and gracefully he spoke to her, and she also smiled back very gracefully. And his tiredness, he had been hunting and was tired, but all that disappeared just by seeing this beautiful lady. So he asked her, "Oh lady, who are you? You are here in the forest. Whose daughter are you? And why are you staying in this forest? I can clearly see that you are of very royal lineage. So please tell me about you." So she replies, her name is Shakuntala. So Shakuntala says, "Indeed, I am the daughter of Vishwamitra and Menaka." So the story there is, we saw briefly mentioned before that Vishwamitra, the great sage, he was first a king born in the dynasty of Kaushika. So that's why he is called as Kaushika. And when he met with Vasishta and then he decided to become a sage, he engaged in great austerities. And one of the things that happened during the austerities was he was tempted by a beautiful woman called Menaka. So this was sent by Indra in order to tempt him and get him out of his austerity. And he actually fell for her. So his austerity was completely lost because Menaka's beauty was so ravishing. So he engaged in physical union with Menaka, and through them a daughter was born who is the Shakuntala. But then, of course, the story continued because by this time he was still a Kshatriya, and that is why Shakuntala is still born in the royal lineage of Kaushika. But after that, of course, he realized his folly of falling to the temptation of lust, and then Vishwamitra engaged in great austerity and did not fall for any temptation. He was put to many further temptations after that. By the time he developed great power, that he was able to withstand all temptations, and thereby he was able to ascend to becoming the great sage known as Vishwamitra eventually. But before he became Vishwamitra, he had this daughter called Shakuntala with Menaka, and they both abandoned her because he, Vishwamitra, was not interested in taking care of a baby now. He wanted to become a sage, and Menaka was a divine damsel, it is said. So the daughter was taken up by the sage Kanva. So they somehow gave this little girl to Kanva, the sage, who had a hermitage in the forest, and they went their own ways. And so Kanva, the sage, raised this girl. So Shakuntala says here that I was raised by the sage Kanva and I'm living here. What can I do for you? You look tired. I can give you some food. Please accept our hospitality. So Dushyanta is now very happy to know about her. As he guessed, she is of royal lineage and she is so beautiful. So he says, what you have spoken is so becoming of you. It's so wonderful to hear. Also, you know that as a princess, you are welcome to choose your match, your partner yourself. So this again goes to show how in those days women had such freedom to choose their partner. We see this in the case of Sita choosing Ram, or the Draupadi choosing Arjuna and the Pandavas through what is called a Swayamvar, where they were able to choose. Many men would come and vie for the bride, but it was up to the woman to choose who she wants. She can set the condition, and whoever meets the condition, only she would accept. So, this is the freedom that women had, and that is what Dushyanta reminds her. He says, you have every right to choose your partner yourself. So, he was hinting to her that being the king, he is ready to be accepted as her husband if she is interested. And of course, she was also interested. She had also fallen in love with him. So they instantly decided to marry then and there according to what is called Gandharva system. So Gandharva system means they say Om, it says here, Om iti yukte yata dharma upayeme shakuntalam Gandharva vidina raja deshakala vidhanavit. So that means according to the Gandharva vidhi, they both, because there is no priest there is no havan, there is no sacrificial fire. So there are many ways of getting married, it is said in the Vedas. One of them is Gandharva Vidhi, where if there is mutual consent between a man and a woman, then they can say Om and they can consummate their wedding then and there. So that's exactly what Dushyant and Shakuntala do. And then that night he stays there and they have physical union, and then he has to go back to the capital the next day. So he says, I shall see you soon, and he goes back. Meanwhile, the sage Kanva comes back the next day, and then after that, eventually the son is born because of this union, and the son grows up to be a very brave son. And eventually, Shakuntala wants to go back because she was waiting for the king to come back. He did not come back, so she goes to the kingdom, to the capital with her son. And when he goes there, it is said that Dushyanta did not accept her because he did not recognize them and he did not accept Shakuntala as his wife, neither the son as his son. And at that time, it is said that a heavenly voice came out and said, O Dushyanta, what you are doing is not right. This is indeed your wife, and this boy is indeed your son. Accepting the son is the right thing to do. This is no ordinary son either. You have to accept him. He will help in propagating your lineage. So do the right thing and accept this noble lady Shakuntala as your wife and this boy as your son. So hearing this, it is said that Dushyanta accepts Shakuntala and Bharata. So the son's name is Bharata, by the way. So this is why the descendants of this lineage from then on are called Bharata. That is why Arjuna is called Bharata in Gita, and Parikshit is addressed as Bharata by Shuka Brahmam, because they are all coming from the great king Bharata, who is the son of Dushyanta and Shakuntala. And Bharata goes on to be such a great king, and that's exactly the reason why Bharata is the name taken by his descendants as Bharata. Now, to pause here, some may be aware of the story of Shakuntala and Dushyanta from the play of Kalidasa. So, there is a very famous play of Kalidasa called Abhigyana Shakuntalam, which is one of the most famous Sanskrit plays ever written, translated in many languages. And that play is exactly based on this particular episode of Dushyanta falling in love with Shakuntala, having a baby, Bharata, first not accepting her and then later accepting her. And that is called Abhigyana Shakuntalam. However, that story is much more colorful, what Kalidasa has written, and that's a very beautiful story, but that is not what is found in Bhagavatam or in Mahabharata. In Mahabharata and Bhagavatam, what we just narrated is the story where they fall in love, they get married instantly, and then the king leaves, and the lady, that is Shakuntala, has a son who grows up to be a very brave son. And then when they go back after a few years looking for the king doesn't accept. Then a heavenly voice comes and interjects and makes him accept. But the story of Kalidasa is very interesting. So quickly, what Kalidasa does is he, of course, adds his poetic license, uses his poetic license to make the story more interesting. And what he writes is that when Shakuntala is met by Dushyanta, as exactly said here, they both fall in love, they get married. And then it is said by Kalidasa that Dushyanta gives a ring to Shakuntala, and he says, you bring this ring whenever you are able to come there, otherwise I'll myself come. I have to now go for my duty. I have to go back to the capital, I'll come back. So he goes back giving a ring to her. And then it is said that the sage Durvasa comes to Shakuntala, but Shakuntala is in feeling of separation from her husband Dushyanta, and therefore she completely ignores the great sage Durvasa coming. So Durvasa gets very angry and he curses her that whoever you are thinking of, he will forget you. So when he curses this, then Shakuntala wakes up from her dreaming and she realizes that this curse is very bad because this means her husband will forget her. So she pleads with the sage, and the sage says, okay, I can give you a way out. If you have anything that will remind him of you, then he'll remember you. So now she is happy because she has a ring that was given her husband Dushyanta. So she says, great. And then they go. It is said that she goes to the capital wearing the ring, but unfortunately, while crossing a river, it is said that she loses the ring in the water. And then she goes to the capital, and Dushyanta, as the story says here also in Bhagavatam, Dushyanta doesn't recognize her and he sends her back. So, unlike here, there in Kalidasa's work, he sends back Shakuntala, and Shakuntala comes back very sad, but she lets it go, and then she is with her son in the forest. Her son Bharata grows to be a very brave boy who's playing with lion cubs. And meanwhile, a fisherman catches a fish, and it is said that the fish has in its stomach a royal ring. So he, being an honest fisherman, he brings it to the court and he shows this ring. And as soon as the ring is shown to the king remembers the whole story of what had happened, the past. He feels bad. He goes in search of Shakuntala. He finds this boy and he finds a curious boy playing with lion cubs in the forest. He asks, "Who are you?" And the boy says, "I am the son of King Dushyanta." So, though the boy has never met the king, he is been taught that he is the son of King Dushyanta. So, he proudly says, so the father, first time seeing the son, is moved to tears. He says, "Oh, please take me to your mother." And then the boy takes the king to the mother Shakuntala, and then they get reunited. This is the story of Abhigyana Shakuntalam. That is why it is called Abhigyana, means recognizing Shakuntala is the name of the play, and the recognition happens through this ring and through this beautiful story. So this is all the poetic license of Kalidasa, which is a great story, a great play, a very famous play of Sanskrit. In fact, the most famous play translated into many languages. But the story is much simpler than that. But the essence is the same, that he forgets his wife and then he is reminded and therefore he accepts the wife. So now moving on, Bharata becomes the king. And as already mentioned, Bharata is a brave warrior. That part is true. Here also Bhagavatam says that he used to play with lions in the forest. Such was his great valor. It says here, Mrigendramsa Tarasa Kridati Sma Sa Balakaha. So Balakaha, the young boy, was Kridati, means he was playing with Mrigendra, the king of all animals. So he was playing with lions. That's how brave he was. So when Bharata goes back and is accepted, he grows up. And after the death of Dushyanta, Bharat becomes king. And Bharat becomes such a great king that he is unparalleled in his achievements as a king, Shuka Brahmam says. It is said that he had the royal marks. In fact, he had the divine marks in his body. He had the lotus mark and the discus mark on his palm and the soles of his feet. And he became the Chakravarti. It is said, Chakravarti Mahayashaha Mahima Giyate Tasya Harer Amsha Bhuvo Bhuvi. So he had the Amsha, that is, he was a partial manifestation of the Supreme Being, a ray of Sri Hari, who became the Chakravarti, that is, the great emperor. And it is said that he conducted 55 fire sacrifices along the banks of Ganga from the source to the mouth, that is, from Gangotri to Ganga Sagar. Gangotri begins in the Himalayas and Ganga Sagar is in Bengal. So all along the banks of Ganga in 55 places he did sacrifices. And then he did 78 sacrifices along Yamuna. And he was also prone to giving great gifts each time. So he gave thousands of cows to various Brahmanas. He gave so many gifts to so many people. He gave, it is said, hundreds of thousands of elephants, gold, and so on. So Shuka Brahma Rishi says here beautifully that neither have any kings in the past, nor shall any king in the future emulate the example of Bharata. That is how glorious Bharata is. He says, Bharatasya mahat karma na purve na apare nripaha. Neither before nor in the future shall anyone match the glory of Bharata. Such was the valor of Bharata, the amount of sacrifices he did, the amount of gifts he gave, the amount of land he ruled. Everything was so great, and therefore he also was revered across the land. It is said that he crushed the various forces. It is listed here: Kiratas, Hunas, Yavanas, Shakas, Mlecha. So these are all people who are said to live in different parts. In fact, Yavanas are supposed to be in the Middle East. Mlechas represent parts of Europe. So Kiratas actually represent further south. Perhaps it is speculated that represents African continent because it says people who are dark skinned. Hunas represent perhaps the Chinese land. So these names are not exactly described as the lands that signify, but this is what commentators have speculated based on the roots of the words, and it does map to many of the descriptions of these lands. So it is said that, as we can see, this spreads to a wide range of land. If it goes from the Middle East to China to all of present day India to southeast of India and all the rest. So he covered such a wide land, and it is said that he established the supremacy of Vedas all across this land. And in his reign, everybody was living happily. Everybody had the object of their desire. And he ruled for a long time. And he left after a very long time as a happy and prosperous kingdom behind him, completely satisfied with his rule and renouncing on his own will. So after Bharata leaves, it is said that Bharata had 3 wives, but they didn't have any progeny that could continue the line. So he prayed to the deities called Maruts. We in fact saw the story of Maruts, how 49 Maruts came from Diti back in the 6th Skandha. So how these 49 Maruts came. So these 49 Maruts is what he prays to. These Maruts represent wind, and they bring forth a baby boy called Bharadwaja, who is born to Brihaspati. So Brihaspati is the guru of the Devas, and it is said that Brihaspati had a child called Bharadwaja, and this child Bharadwaja was brought to Bharata, and he became the successor to Bharata. And Bharadwaja will now continue the line, and we will see going forward how Bharadwaja and his progeny all the way lead to Pandavas. With that, the lineage of Puru will end, and then we will see the lineage of Yadu after that. So in this chapter, we saw the beautiful story of Dushyanta and Shakuntala, which is a very famous story because of the play, and then the story of the great king Bharata. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.